1400 years ago, armies of Arabian nomads swept out of the desert and conquered half the world. They claimed that God gave them a prophet and that God gave them an empire. The question remains, were Arabs in the 600s AD even Muslims at all? When it comes to the origin of Islam, there is no full light history. There is only historic darkness. The problem about researching the rise and birth of Islam is that we have absence of evidence. We have nothing up to which to tell a story. Just a mention of a holy man, Muhammad, and his anointed pilgrimage with one God, but no documented text to say who he actually was or where he came from. There is no Muslim testimony in the 600s. When the Romans conquered the Middle East, they left behind all kinds of evidence, inscriptions, coins, histories, etc. It was said Islam began 1400 years ago by Islamic leaders, so we'll research its beginnings in the 600 AD era. Istanbul in 632 AD was known as Constantinople for 300 years. This was the capital city of the Roman Empire, run by Constantine, a Christian city in a Christian world, a universal religion and empire. Constantine spread Christianity in the 300s AD. The great palace of Constantinople today is now in ruins. In the 7th century AD, it was the center of the world. In 630 AD, the Romans were still at war with the Persians. After 25 years, the Romans triumphed and were once again the dominant world power. The Roman emperor had no idea that wandering Arabs from the deserts were planning to attack them at their weakest moment. Although these Arab militants were not Muslims at the time, current-day Muslims believe that they have invaded and conquered in the name of Islam. To the ancients, the Arabs were notorious savages of all the people of the earth, the most despised and insignificant. Yet, after 10 years of the first half of the 7th century, they deprived the Roman Empire of their finest provinces and crushed the Persian civilization. These two empires were at their weakest moment because Rome and Persia had just ended war with each other. These Arabs came in with no mercy and attacked and took full advantage and took possession of most of the Middle East. Arabs transformed North Africa and Spain in just a few decades, and a whole new civilization created from China to France in just a century. They deemed that Muhammad started this conquest because he heard an angel in a cave prophesy it. Islam claims this message from Muhammad gave them an empire. Patricia Kroner, a professor at Princeton, after her Islamic study concluded you cannot doubt or accept the story of Islam in regards to its origin. Muhammad authored the Book of Quran, but we have the absence of evidence. The book came out of nowhere. The Bedouin Arabs, however, claim that they know everything about Muhammad. It is just not documented. Vague biographies scripted 200 years after his lifetime seem to vaguely fill in gaps in the lack of continuity of Islamic faith materializing. Millions upon millions of people believe the stories about Muhammad, the great prophet. When the Jews ruled Jerusalem, they had Temple Moriah, which dominated the city. When the Romans made Jerusalem Christian, it became a place for Christian pilgrimage. The Romans constructed the new holy center, the Holy Sepulchre Church. The problem with Jerusalem was that it was a peaceful place of holy congregation and it was easily penetratable with little defense. A vast cathedral was erected over Jesus' place of crucifixion. In the year 636 AD, Arab marauders surrounded the walls of Jerusalem. The bishop denoted that it was dangerous to leave. All the holy men can do was look from their windows and await the arrival of the Arabs. The Arabs were closing in. Out of the desert they came and inhabited the city of Jerusalem, which was undesired by the residing Christian and Jewish followers. The Arabs peacefully negotiated their prolonged presence and observation of the city, as the inhabitants of Jerusalem were not warlike at all and were a peaceful worshipping civilization. At this time, the Christian and Jewish residents of Jerusalem noted that they had no idea what these Arabic wanderers' religion was or their purpose. purpose there. The problem was these group of Arab tyrants were ruling over people who were well versed educationally and had very sophisticated religious beliefs and ideas. They did not know the Arabs' motives or beliefs. The Jews and Christians viewed them as people coming from the desert. They did not know who they were or what their motives were. At first, the new Arab rulers were interested in the Jews. They weren't interested in the Christian clergy or monasteries. Instead, they started preying on the ruins of ancient Jewish temples. The Christians suspected a conspiracy. The Arabs started building prayer halls on very sensitive spots for Jewish faith. This was very disrespectful and arrogant. Although, after a while, the Jews felt the Arabs were liberating Judaism and they were bringing attention to the Jewish beliefs and traditions and not to the Christians. But what the Jewish people didn't realize was that they were dealing with a new religion. However, there is no mention or witness of a prophet Muhammad at this time. After studying the Old Testament, the Arabs discovered Abraham with his son Isaac was the father of the Jews. Today, Muslims tell a different story. The present-day Muslims also revere Abraham because, as well as Isaac, he had another son, Ishmael, the father of the Arabs. Even though there is no continuity to link Abraham from his lineage between 2000 and 1000 BC to their new religion, which sprung up around 650 AD, the present-day Muslims still hold it to be true and regard Abraham as the high and holy precursor and ancestor to their faith. Muslims even go on further to say that as for Abraham, it was the Islamic faith he founded and not the religion of the Jews. In the Quran, it states Abraham and Ishmael built a house of God in a place called Mecca or Mecca, their holy land. Mecca, believed by Muslims to be the dwelling place of Adam as well, it was said to be the birthplace of Muhammad. In the center is what they call the Kaaba, believed to be built by Abraham and Ishmael and its foundations laid by Adam, the first man. Mecca is where Muslims believe everything began, a crossroads of faith. The Quran alludes to biblical stories. Many religious experts, after studying the Quran, suggest that what we have here with the Quran is a response on the part of, let us say, Muhammad to the debates of what were going on in Jewish and Christian communities, where they were debating the theological issues and questions that came out of the Hebrew Bible and New Testament. The Quran seems to be an effort to engage in the discussion. So there's this late critique and stance on these religious discourses that can only have been brought to their attention during the inhabitants of Jerusalem residing amongst the Jews and Christians. The Quran gives its account of the Old Testament and gives an Islamic interpretation or explanation of the testimony of the apostles written in the New Testament. The Quran depicts Jesus as a prophet and not a Messiah, and say that Jesus was never really crucified and that God played a trick on his apostles and put Jesus's likeness on a murderer so that the murderer was crucified and not Jesus at all, which explains his resurrection. Christian scholars say it sounds like a child's response to a script not entirely read, and made them question the authenticity of the Quran entirely, and whether Muhammad actually existed or was just a made-up figure to impose a spiritual leader or much-needed prophet to this new springed faith.